We've got some interesting topics to cover, and we also have our first live guest. You don't seem excited.
I'm incredibly excited. I'm just trying to show. I'm just trying to show a sort of professionalism and reserve.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry. I didn't have time to arrange the sort of high-kicking cheerleaders to
come okay. But nonetheless, yes, our first live guest in the shape of my friend and colleague Aaron Colgrove. And actually, with that in mind, we should probably see if we can get him in to start our first topic. Our first topic is going to be all about the proposed budget in the US from Trump's White House. So let's just add Aaron to the call, and here we go. So hello, Aaron.
Hey Mark, how's it going?
I'm doing okay. It's good to see you and to hear you. And we've invited you to talk today about our first topic, which is the proposed budget changes from the Trump administration, from the Trump White House. I'm particularly interested to hear your take on this because I have lots of friends who have very extreme perspectives, whether it be Republican or Democrat. I don't have that many Republican friends, it should say, but but basically what I'm saying is you are the most independent voice I know in the US at the moment, and so that's why I've invited you here today. Now, there has been an America First, a budget blueprint to make America great again document published by the White House, and yesterday, when we were planning this, or rather going over the final plans for this month's podcast, it just struck us as a very interesting, potentially idealistic agenda, and to put it another way, I suppose it looks as though the White House wants to take a step back from looking after the nation's history and humanities, ostensibly with a view to propping up, for example, especially the military. Is that a fair observation?
It's kind of walking a fine line, I would think. Republicans, as a whole, from what I understand, are not into big government, where the federal government tries to control everything. Mm-hmm. They like small government. With the previous administration, there was a lot of big government involvement. A lot of people that I've talked to seem to think, at least on the Republican side, that's how the current administration came to where they are and getting voted in. So I think it's kind of hard to say. I think he is trying to do back to that small government again. It's just a matter of where he's prioritizing that smaller government is the issue has been raised.
Now, as an archaeologist, I know that you've already been feeling the bite of the freeze on federal hiring in the US.
Right.
Essentially, it's much more difficult to get a job at the moment. And that said, though, there's also, I've seen arguments made that this may well help, for example, the working class. I mean, can you give us a little perspective on that as well, just before I invite Andy in to sort of comment?
Yeah, they have done that freeze for started on January 23rd. It's for 90 days. Mm-hmm. While they try to figure out a better way of staffing the government. Again, smaller government, that's what they're going for. So that's why they put the freeze on. It's not a permanent freeze, but they have literally stopped all hiring except certain military groups within the federal government. And I just recently heard they've also, like the National Park Service, for them to be able to function properly, they've been able to get a little bit more wiggle room. But for the most part, yeah, it's been completely blocked. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of ironic where they would sit there and say, they're doing this to help the working man. Well, I'm a working man, but I can't get a job. So I kind of understand they're trying to do better for all Americans. And so it might take a little bit of, I guess you would say, fine tuning. Mm-hmm. But again, I almost feel like as an independent that he's trying to do too much at once, and they're rather drastic. It's causing a lot of headache stir with just Americans all over the place. That's why you see such a big divide right now in the United States.
Okay. Now, well, there is actually an irony inherent, I think, here, and I think Andy might find this interesting, in so much as the government is freezing hiring, which is affecting, for example, archaeological, cultural jobs, and yet at the same time as well in this budget document, trying to take a step back from being responsible for that monetarily. I mean, I can't. Maybe I'm just being too British here, but what do you think, Andy?
I think my initial reaction to the whole document was how polarizing it's likely to be. Looking at it from as an outsider, there appears to be a complete disjoint between Trump's stated claims to want to reunite America and make America great again, and a budget which is cutting anything from the National Endowment for the Arts to Meals on Wheels, taking in public broadcasting, and which includes Sesame Street. It's potentially making Big Bird redundant
while introducing incidentally a White House on wheels. Sorry, the Southern White House.
You can see this in the commentary. You've got right of centre commentators applauding it for the kind of reasons that Aaron's talked about. It's a budget that supposedly protects jobs by promoting deregulation and making it easier for businesses to prosper and so on, according to that particular school of thought. On the other hand, you've got somebody like John Oliver the other night on Last Week Tonight showing a roller title of all the organisations they're going to cut and describing it as the end credits for America. So,
well, and it feels a little bit. It feels a little bit as though we are actually in a bit of a glass house here.
I think the key point I would make is, and certainly the sort of commentators that I've read talking about it, and I again as a writer, as a researcher, as somebody who publishes effectively news and commentary on the news on Pipeline, I have to try and read around the entire subject and be fair. But one of the things that everybody is picking up, is, pro and anti, is that this plays to an agenda that wasn't really overtly part of the campaign, but it's certainly been articulated by Steve Bannon, the chief strategist in the White House, which is that he has stated his aim is to deconstruct the quotes administrative state.
There has been a widely spread some interview footage which was captured where he talked about that being one of his agendas, for sure. I suppose, I'll come back to you, Aaron, on that, in so much as obviously there is a Steve Bannon and his political leanings to one side for a moment, Breitbart, etc. It's interesting that is a stated agenda, but also at the same time as well, there's this sort of subtext of propping up a military which is, apparently, according to the narrative at least, failing. And yet under Obama, we've had actually some of the most invested military we've ever seen. They've been designing the military of the future. There have been, in some respects, actually, they were criticised, in fact, for spending too much money on things like drones, future technology that might prevent the loss of life in the infantry, this kind of thing. What is the balance here? Is the government actually trying to deconstruct? Are they actually trying to consolidate military? Is the military in need of help? Help me out here. I just don't understand.
Right, and I don't know why they seem to think that bigger is better, more is better. As an independent before, I've made comments about nothing to do necessarily with heritage, but people I've talked with is, you've heard them talk about in politics during the debates, like failing infrastructure, roads, bridges, and all that. Really, is it really that hard to let go of one bobber to finance some of this stuff? And I really don't think that's a big deal. But it's just, again, that polarizing thing. The Republicans, as far as I'm concerned, from the people I talk to, love military. It's always what it's been. When a president who's a Republican is in office, military, that always seems to be kind of the focal point. Where on the Democrat, they always try to downsize the military, downsize it to the numbers that they think they need.
Can I jump in there, Aaron? Because there is, looking at the budget proposals and some of the sites that are due to be cut in the national heritage areas and things like that, these are the very sites that commemorate, celebrate, and promote as part of local communities and economies. Sites connected with, the War of Independence, the Civil War. These iconic places, which would appear to be key to national culture and national identity, and yet the government appears to be prepared to cut these loose. And again, there appears to be a disjoint there.
Yes and no, I would think, because, and this is how I look at it, when it comes to the heritage of the United States especially, there is so much around that we see, especially like you said, the Civil War battle sites and stuff, that regardless of what the federal government does, it's mostly non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that deal with that, like the Civil War Trust, that takes care of these sites because the federal government either won't put the money in, and this is regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican. That's just the way politics work. It's the way our culture is, and how we view heritage is drastically different than how heritage is viewed in.
And actually, I suppose in particular, in terms of Civil War battle sites, my understanding is that it's seen as much more of it's almost like a folk history part to it. So you have elements like, there'll be the daughters of the veterans of the so and so battle and this kind of thing who will be. So I can sort of see why there is an arguable pathway there for people local communities taking more responsibility for this stuff potentially. But I suppose what I'm just confused by is just this curious sense that from the outside it looks as though actually the American Army, and indeed, for example, the veterans and awareness surrounding veterans has never been greater, and yet that's one of the arguments. One of the arguments for cutting things like the endowment for arts, and which incidentally has always been a political football. It's an easy target, obviously, especially for people further to the right of the spectrum.
And it's the same in the UK. We have to add.
Well, yes, it is. Yeah. In terms of who's going to fund museums, who's going to look after in the realm of archaeology, who's going to look after archives, this kind of thing. But I suppose it's one of those things where I just don't quite understand why it's one or t'other, if you see what I mean. I mean, is there a good explanation within the US or within the current dialogue as to why it is you can't have a substantial cultural heritage endowment and also actually the biggest military industrial complex that the world has ever seen? I mean, frankly, it's already 10 times bigger than most.
Yeah. And I don't see why you can't. And of course, I'm not a politician, so I mean, I don't know what goes on there, but I would think it's wouldn't be that difficult to achieve both. When it comes also to the heritage stuff, I'm really torn apart both ways on this whole issue with it, because on one point, I've got my colleagues and friends that I know that are in anthropology, archaeology, history, all those conservation fields and stuff for the heritages. And now, with what's going on with Trump, you see it all over Facebook. They're screaming, they're hollering, and all this stuff. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I'm like, where was this passion? Why does it take something like this to have that passion to try to get heritage protected and the funds for conservation? Why does it need this? Where's your yelling been before this?
I think that's a really interesting point, and it's one certainly I've observed with campaign groups here in the UK, where it takes an immediate threat to mobilise the larger part of your base, if you like, to use the political term. Perhaps is it down to something as simple as these days most people's lives are actually really quite complicated and they've got lots of jugglers balls in the air. And it takes something special to draw focus from, going out and getting the shopping and taking the dog for a walk to taking the dog for a walk on the demonstration to protect your local historic monument or museum that's threatened with closure. It's that kind of calculation that people are making, and unless you're almost a semi-professional observer or even a professional observer and activist, right. You're there to mobilise the base when you can, when you need to.
Right, and that was the thing. Sometimes I wonder when I see this going on, and it's nothing that like I said, I understand both sides, but it's just like that mobilization, that educating people on what's going on. Again, it goes back to, but why can't you do the same thing with the heritage before this happened? It's almost like you sit there and just assume it's like that saying, you don't appreciate it until you lose it. They're just sitting there going, okay, we have this. All of a sudden, someone takes it away, and all of a sudden, now everyone's just losing their mind over it.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't support either side, but I'm kind of frustrated, I guess, saying, where was this passion before this happened just now? And I'm not saying that I'm not guilty about it one bit, but I definitely need to educate the populace and get them to understand why it's important.
Well, we did quote it. I think Mark did quote it last time. It's the old Joni Mitchell song, isn't it? They paved paradise and put up a parking lot. You don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Right.
Can I move it on to a slightly different tack, and I suppose it's related to what we've just been talking about. One of the things I've noticed again, and maybe it's a particular function of the American political system, but both most of the representative organisations in the humanities, history, the Archaeological Institute of America have put in place direct communications systems on their websites, so that people can directly lobby their senator or their congressman. And there's certainly a strong sense that this is actually part of the political game that everybody plays. That what the White House says is really actually only an advisory. It's a sort of a mission statement, if you like. And in the end, what's going to end up, what the country is going to end up with is what can be got through Congress and the Senate. And in those situations, most politicians are looking to the vote at the next election, whether it's the midterms or whatever, and they're not going to vote. They're not going to be the turkey voting for Christmas to get rid of a much loved or much used local project, whether it is Meals on Wheels or whether it is the local historical site or the local theatre or whatever. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, because it just, for me, when I look at the politics around here in the United States, I see it as a lot of, like you said, show. It's not about what, at least from my perspective, it's not about what's important. It's about what gets you the most votes. And it's become a like almost blatantly more apparent now in the last decade than it's been in the past. So yeah, I would say that's probably a fair statement, where, if a certain senator, House representative, state representative, mayor, whatever, said, "Ooh, if I might be able to save this cemetery or this historical site, that might get me more votes," that's what motivates them, not the fact that is their history, our history, important events, stuff like that. That, I don't think, in my opinion, that has anything to do with most of the stuff that goes on in politics. So yeah, I would agree, it's mostly for the votes.
And I suppose that's where it comes back to this idea of this element and idea of education, I suppose, in so much as I think no matter what end of the political spectrum you're on, people tend to have a love of history, whether it's their own family history or whether it's a local site or something like that. And I suppose when these changes really when they really hit home, that's when the political mountains start to move. And so, this, as we say, this is an advisory document. It's just, I suppose, I was just curious this month in particular about it because of some of the arguments made surrounding this idea of either or. And I suppose maybe it's worthwhile to sort of bringing this segment to a close on this notion that one of the most famous quotes from Churchill, love him or hate him, was actually in terms of the Second World War and the effort there. People were saying, well, let's shut down funding for the arts and that kind of thing in order to fight the war. And he said, well, what are we fighting for? What's the point? If all you're doing is investing in the military, then actually you're also draining your society. And maybe that's something just to bear in mind. But I think we've done well. We've done well to have a fairly balanced discussion there. There's been no bashing of any particular political direction. Although obviously I did question the idea of the Southern White House, but I'm sorry, I apologise. But anyway, yes, thank you so much for your time, Aaron. It's been worthwhile just hearing, as you say, the fact that you both agree and disagree with both sides, I think, is an important element here. So, thank you so much. Okay, sorry.
I was going to say, can I just mention one thing too? Just last thing I wanted to bring up real quick. Sorry, but I just want to bring up an example here too.
Yeah.
Like the Cahokia Mounds in Illinois, they're not affected by these budget cuts at all that Trump is doing, because they're run by the state. It's up to the state to decide where the money goes. So some of the places are not really affected by it. Hence the reason it's kind of a back and forth. If the National Park Service had control of it, that'd be one thing, but it's not. It's controlled by the state, so that's their funding they need to worry about. So, and there's other sites like that in the United States. So that's why it's just kind of that battle back and forth. But in the end, my personal opinion, just closing for me, is I still don't think closing the Art of the Humanities and the endowment of the arts and stuff like that was my best choice. I think we could have cut elsewhere that would have been all right. Like I said, a bomber or two, and I think everyone would have been okay.
So was that Obama? Obama. Sorry.
I think my last comment on it would be just an observation. And I think as somebody quite close to the White House said recently about another contentious issue, healthcare, who realised it was so complicated.
Right.
Incredibly complicated. Incredibly complicated. You have no idea. You have no idea.
Well, thank you very much, guys. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.